Greetings. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Exit to Excel podcast. My name is LT, and I'm your podcast host, and this is Rocky, your co-podcast host. Welcome to today's episode, the episode where I'm talking about nobody believes you and building your brag book of proof. But before we get started, let me tell you a little bit about myself in case it's your first time joining and why this podcast is different. So, I've been an HR business partner for almost 25 years across a myriad of organizations, everything from Fortune 500 companies to high growth organizations. I've worked across a variety of industries, everything from healthcare, finance, entertainment, business process outsourcing. I've done and seen a lot. One of the things I've been involved with to a great extent are reductions in force, layoffs. And I've probably laid off thousands of people over the course of my career. Everything from entire plants to that one individual that had to be let go from a department. On the flip side of that, I have also been subjected to layoffs 4 times over the course of my career, most recently in October, when I was told, thank you, but your services are no longer needed. So, fortunately, the times I've been laid off, I've had an opportunity to work with outplacement companies. These are companies like Lee Hecht Harrison and Right Management. These are companies that are retained to help displaced workers find other jobs. We have a job coach. They do our resume. They do our LinkedIn. There's all kind of webinars we can participate in and trainings. So I've had an opportunity to participate in these things over the course of my career. So now that I'm in this space and, with all the things that's going on in the market today, I've decided to start this podcast to help people who may not be fortunate enough to have that type of resource. I am telling it all, okay? As a HR business partner, I know what goes on behind the scenes, behind the doors, but then I also know how you feel when you've been told that you no longer have a job. So I'm here to help you with that. Okay. So in addition to, preparing you for a layoff. So if you haven't watched those first 2 episodes, make sure you do. I talk about the first 48 hours of things that you should do once you're notified. And then I also talk about the signs you need to look for because trust and believe nobody is safe. So you'll want to go back and watch that as well. So now what we're doing, we are now preparing ourselves for this very challenging job market. This is a competition, okay? I was talking to somebody the other day. I was like, this is not a game. They reminded me, but yes, it is. It is a game, and you're exactly right. So that's why I'm telling you how to play to win, how to bring your A game to the job search. So for today's episode, I'm going to tell you just straight up, that's just how I am. That's how we do things here. Nobody believes you when you go in for an interview. Okay. You know why nobody believes you? Because every candidate that we interview, because I've interviewed plenty of candidates, every person that comes in says the same thing. Oh, I'm results driven. Oh, I drive transformation. Yes, I'm a change agent. And you know what we hear? Wah, 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 wah. Because everybody sounds the same. So that's why it's very important that you are that person that stands out from the group of people that or the 5-6 people that we decide to interview for a job. You want to be the one that stands out from the crowd because, again, I'm just in full disclosure, I don't like interviewing people, and that's the reason why, because I feel like people are just telling you stuff that you want to hear, and everybody sounds the same. But when you get that one person who is able to clearly articulate what they have done and they don't just make claims, they actually bring the receipts, I'm like, oh, tell me more. So when myself and the hiring manager and the other people on the interview panel get together, it's obvious the people who stood out from the crowd because they had those receipts. they have what I call a brag book. Now, you've probably heard that term before. It is where you have a book or a file of undeniable evidence so that when you are sitting across from that interviewer, they can't help but say, that's a person that we need. So, how many of you have a brag book or a file? So, as I was preparing for this episode, I pulled mine out, and it's a little embarrassing to tell you the truth. It's just a file of stuff, and believe it or not, I'm sure my people in Charlotte, North Carolina will appreciate this. I have my performance appraisal from 1994. I have a performance appraisal from when I worked for the Limited. I'm probably dating myself here. But what I've done is I've just thrown a lot of these things in a folder, right? Another, thank you accolade for a project that I worked on. I've just thrown things in a folder. So if you are like me, there's time to level up. It's time to level up so that you can better prepare and demonstrate your skills and abilities and accomplishments with that interviewer. Or if you are positioning yourself for promotion, this brag book is going to come into play as well. Now, we're going to use this brag book to build brag stories. And these are the stories that you are telling in your interviews to the recruiters and people like me that make them want to hire you immediately. So that's what we're talking about today, the brag book, because it's time to stop being humble and you've got to start bragging strategically in order to stand out from the crowd. So, before we dive in, though, let's go to our Ask LT segment. So, this is the segment where no appointment is needed. I'm your personal HR business partner, your secret weapon. And so you can contact me on my social media, Exit to Excel. Use the hashtag AskLT and ask your question. You do it on TikTok and on Instagram. You can even do it on YouTube. So ask your questions there. Sometimes I will respond in the social media. Sometimes I will, talk about them on a podcast, especially if it's a topic that is of particular interest. But I happened to get two questions that were very relative to the topic that we're talking about today. So this is from Rachel, and she asks, LT, I know I'm good at what I do and I deliver results, but I have a hard time talking about myself and discussing them in interviews because I feel like I'm sounding arrogant. How do I discuss my impact and my achievements without sounding so? So that's exactly what we're talking about today, Rachel. The difference between bragging and proving is specificity, right? Bragging is, hey, I'm really good in sales. Strategic bragging is, I increased territory revenue by 34% in 8 months by implementing a new client retention process. It's about the specificity. So we're going to talk about how you can be more specific in your stories and your responses so that it comes off more strategically versus just making claims that aren't backed up. Next question is from Marcus. Marcus, I work in communications, so I don't have obvious metrics like sales numbers. So how do I quantify my impact? So Marcus, you're in a role like me in human resources where it is hard sometimes for us to be able to quantify our work and our value. However, note that every job creates value and every value can be measured. Now, you may not have the revenue numbers, but you do have efficiency improvements, time saved, cost saved, customer satisfaction increases. And those are the things that we need to pull out to make as part of your brag book. And I'm going to show you how to get those numbers today. So, one more question. Jennifer asked, what if my biggest accomplishments were part of team efforts? I really don't want to take credit for things that other people did. So that's also a good question because a lot of the work that we do is part of a team, right? But you can talk about the team's wins while highlighting your specific contributions. So you're not stealing credit, you're just showing how you drove the parts that you were responsible for, or if you're leading a team, how you were able to obtain those results from others, which is actually more impressive than, solo achievements. So keep those questions coming. Again, use the hashtag AskLT on my social media, Exit to Excel on TikTok or Instagram or YouTube. And I will answer there, or maybe I'll even pick your question to answer on the podcast one week. Now, let's dig into your brag book or maximize the one you already have so that, I can teach you how to brag strategically. So let me tell you something that you may not have known. 90% of interviews and resumes, they're a bunch of fluff. They're just a lot of humble claims with zero strategic bragging. So even when you say, hey, I'm a strategic thinker, I'm detailed oriented, I'm a natural leader, I'm a team player. You know what that sounds like to me and to others? It just sounds like a bunch of noise because literally every candidate says the same thing. So here's an example of an interview that I sat in on. I was actually interviewing for an HR manager. Actually, it wasn't my hire, it was somebody else's hire. So the candidate walked in, had a very solid resume and great energy. And it was a panel interview. So one of us asked what was her biggest accomplishment. And she said that she led an employee engagement initiative that really transformed the culture. So one of the panelists asked, so what does transformed mean specifically? And she said, well, the organization transformed, people were much happier. We got more positive feedback and leadership was impressed. So then we continued to press her, well, what were the actual results? And she responded, well, I don't have exact numbers, but I do know that the morale definitely improved across the board. So that was that interview. So then we interviewed someone else. Now, when we asked the same question, what was your proudest achievement or biggest achievement? This person responded, I designed our employee onboarding program to address retention issues. We were losing 28% of new hires within their first 90 days, which was costing us approximately $85,000 annually in recruitment and training cost. I created a structured 30, 60-day, 90-day program with mentoring, pairing, skills assessments, and regular check-ins. We reduced 90-day turnover from 28% to 9% within 9 months and improved new hire satisfaction. And he went on with more specifics and more numbers. Now, look, this was the same role. They both had similar experience, but one person just made these humble claims, but the second person came in strategically bragging and had the receipts and proof to back it up. So the data also backs this up in terms of how effective this is. 92% of recruiters say specific quantified accomplishments are the most important factor in hiring decisions. Candidates who use numbers in their interview responses are 40% more likely to receive offers. And then 78% of hiring managers say they can't differentiate between candidates who don't provide specific examples. So this is what pains me. Most professionals, a lot of people, they have incredible accomplishments and they have driven real impact. They've solved real problems. They just don't know how to strategically brag about it. And this is what your brag book fixes. Now, again, some of you already may have a version of a brag book. I know I did a seminar not too long ago, and one of the ladies showed her brag book. It was about that thick, right? So maybe you already have a folder or a notebook with your performance reviews, your certificates, or whatever. And that's a very good start. But again, in today's competitive environment, remember, we are competing against other people. We are training and approaching this like an elite athlete. So we're going to take that brag book and we're going to level it up. Now, if you are not working right now and you're thinking, darn, I don't have any of that stuff. And again, I think for me, that's one reason why I did this podcast, is because I haven't done a good job of collecting all of my information. I haven't done a good job of collecting the metrics. And when you are laid off, typically your access to your computer and maybe your office is off within maybe a 4-hour period, if not immediately. And that's what happened to me. Even though I kind of saw the signs of layoff coming up or being possible, I did not collect my things. I didn't collect the emails of accolades. I didn't collect how we had reduced attrition. I didn't collect how our engagement scores had increased. I didn't collect any of that stuff. So if you're working, go ahead and start getting those things now. If you're not working, you don't have access, don't worry about it. I'm going to show you how you can excavate your wins and build a powerful brag book pretty fast. Okay. So just note that your brag book isn't just a collection of accomplishments, it's a true strategic weapon that proves that you can deliver results. So today we're going to start building your brag book right away. So whether you're starting from scratch or starting from some mess like this and upgrading what you have, or you're able to build it proactively, we need to set the foundation to do so. So let's just set the stage for what a brag book actually is. It is a strategic collection of your quantified professional accomplishments organized by impact type and audience. You can think of it as your personal case study library. It's documented proof of the specific value you've delivered throughout your career. So it's not just a folder of performance reviews or a list of job duties. It is a curated arsenal of evidence that proves you can deliver results. Now, remember when you're interviewing, again, this is going to be invaluable when you're interviewing. Trust me, if you follow this process, if you follow what I'm saying, I'm telling you, you're going to go into your interviews a lot more confident and a lot more comfortable, and you're going to be thoroughly prepared for the questions they're going to ask you. But note that the reason why they want to see what you've done is because they are expecting that you'll be able to do the same thing in the role they're hiring you for. So that's why it needs to be really, really solid evidence. And at the end of the day, not every accomplishment needs to be in your brag book. Okay. So let's look at what a bad brag is and what a strategic brag is. So a bad brag is, hey, I manage a team of 5 people. Whoop-de-doo. A strategic brag is, I inherited a team with 40% turnover and 60% missed deadlines. I implemented weekly one-on-ones and project tracking that reduced turnover to 8% and improved on-time delivery to 95% within 6 months. See the difference? One is just where you manage the team. It doesn't really give me any details on how you manage them or how you made a difference or what really changed. And then the second one is where you have very, very specifics in terms of what you did, how you did it, and what you achieved. Let's look at another one. A bad brag is, I handle customer service. Again, whoop-de-doo. The strategic brag is, I redesigned our customer complaint process, reducing average resolution time from 5 days to 24 hours and improving customer satisfaction scores from 3.2 to 4.6 stars. So see the difference? So let's talk about the elements that make up a strategic brag. So element 1 is the challenge. Think about what problem existed, what was broken or missing, what was the issue. Okay, that's element 1. Element 2 is your action. What did you specifically do about it? Okay. Element 3, the measurable result. What changed and by how much? The by how much is very important. Again, this is where those numbers are going to come in. And then element 4, the business impact. Why did this matter to the organization? What impact did it have? Now, for those of you that already have a brag book, look at it and see if your brags have these 4 elements. Most people will have the action and the result, but they're missing the challenge, context, and the business impact. That's what transform your regular brags to a strategic brag. Now, if you're starting from scratch, don't overwhelm yourself trying to remember everything at one time. Just think back to the things that you're most proud of and then go from there. I know all of us think about those certain milestones over the course of our career or in our last job where you can't forget it because either you busted your behind, you were, recognized for it, maybe you got awards, whatever. So start with those really, really big wins and go from there. Now, let's talk about the organization of your brag book, because again, this is where the rubber really hits the road. Now, most people organize, well, some people organize their brag book like mine. You just throw stuff in a folder and then go flipping through it, looking for stuff, whatever you need to. But then a lot of people will organize it chronologically. That's JV. That's juvenile. That is, amateur hour. Again, we are training as elite athletes. So how does the elite athlete who is approaching this very differently stand out? How do they organize their brag books? There are 3 different methods that you can use to organize it. One is by impact type. That means you can organize it by your revenue or growth brags, your efficiency cost brags, people leadership brags, maybe innovation and problem solving brags, or quality and customer service brags. So that's method 1, the impact type, the type of impact that you had. Method 2 is the audience. So are your brags mainly around startup and growth companies where agility and resourcefulness and building from scratch is very important? Maybe you have large corporation brags, and these are brags of scale and process and cross-functional collaboration. Leadership role brags is another way to organize it, where you have, things you've done around people development or strategic thinking or change management. And then also maybe your individual contributor brags. And this is where you individually showed excellent execution and expertise in results delivery. So that's method 2. Method 3, by career stage. So maybe you just want to go throughout your career and pick out your greatest hits, and you feature your top 3 or 4 that are most impressive, universally appealing accomplishments. Maybe you were a supporting cast, and these were strong accomplishments where you showed breadth and consistency. And then maybe you have where you have, your deep bench where your solid wins that prove sustained performance over time. So these are 3 methods of ways that you can strategically organize your brag book. And again, by organizing it this way, it's just going to set a very strong foundation for when we get into the resumes and into the interviewing and networking. So, call to action for those of you that already have a brag book, time to reorganize. Most of you are just throwing things in a folder like me. Maybe you've been organizing things chronologically. That's going to make it hard to find the right story for the right situation. So now is the time to reorganize. If you are currently seeking work and you don't have access, you can start with method 3, your greatest hits first, whatever comes to mind, because you'll want to have that information readily available for your networking and your interviews. And for people who are currently working, again, go ahead and start getting that information now from your work systems and such, because you don't want to get caught into a situation where you're cut off from that information and you don't have it. And also that information is going to be good for you when you're preparing for your performance reviews or being considered for a promotion. So it's good for you as well. Now, as with every podcast, I'm all about the AI. So I'm going to pepper in a couple of AI prompts to help you with your brag book. So here's one to help you organize your accomplishments strategically. If you're like, okay, I don't know what you're talking about, method one, career, method one by impact, method three by career. I can't wrap my brain around that. This is where AI is going to help you. So here's a prompt. I'm also going to put it down in the comments so that you can cut and paste it when you're ready to work on this. So the prompt is, you are a career coach. I'm organizing my professional brag book and I need help categorizing my accomplishments strategically. Here are my major accomplishments, and you'll want to list 8 to 12 of your achievements there. And then say, help me. One, identify which category each accomplishment fits. Two, rank them by overall impressiveness and broad market appeal. Three, suggest which accomplishments would be most compelling for whatever your target role or industry positions are. Four, identify any gaps in my brag book that I should work to fill in. And then five, ask me for any additional context about my target roles or these accomplishments. So you can use that AI prompt to help you organize your brag book to how it's best going to fit your needs and how whatever works best for you. Now, note that even when you organize your brag book, it's not static, it's going to evolve over time. So you'll be adding new examples. Maybe you'll be thinking about things down the road. So again, it's just kind of a working book, so to speak. But most professionals should have between 10 to 15 strong brags spanning over the course of their career, and not just 50 mediocre ones. You want to think about quality over quantity here, and strategic impact over just a list of activities. So let's talk about the structure of a brag story using the STAR Plus method. Most of you know the STAR method is widely talked about for interviews and even your resume. Is the S for situation, T for task, A for action, and R for result. But it is the plus that is going to allow you to hit a home run every time. The elites in this game, the ones that are playing to win, they use STAR Plus for strategic bragging. So let's break it down in terms of what it is. So S is the situation. This is where you set the scene with enough context to understand why this mattered. T stands for task, your specific responsibility or challenge. The A for action, what you actually did. And this is the part where a lot of people are often too vague. R is the result, the measurable outcome. And then the plus is your impact and proof, why this mattered to the business and what it proves about you. So the plus is what transforms a humble accomplishment into strategic bragging. It's where you explicitly connect your work to business value and state what proves your capabilities. So let me show you an example, a real actual example. So this was actually for a manager, and the situation that they explained was, when I joined the company, our customer onboarding process was completely manual. New customers were waiting 3 to 4 weeks to get it fully set up. We were getting complaints, and our customer service team was spending 80% of their time on administrative tasks instead of strategic account management. See how they set the stage? That is the situation. So then what is the task? As the operations manager, so I like how they restated what their role was. As the operations manager, I was tasked with improving the onboarding experience while reducing the burden on our customer success team. Very succinct what they were tasked with. Now the action. The action that they took, this is what they said, I mapped out the entire 47-step onboarding process. I identified 23 steps that could be automated, and I worked with our IT team to build a customer portal where clients could upload documents, track progress, and access training materials. I also created templated workflows and established SLAs for each phase of onboarding. So there they've clearly outlined the action that they took. So now what is the result? So the result is what they explained. We reduced average onboarding time from 22 days to 5 days. We eliminated 87% of customer complaints related to setup delays and freed up our customer service success team to focus on strategic initiatives. So that's the result. Now, most people would end right there, right? But the plus is where you're really going to drive it home with that impact and proof. This directly contributed to our 28% increase in customer retention that year because customers were seeing value faster. It also enabled our customer success team to take on 40% more accounts without adding headcount, saving us approximately $280,000 in hiring cost. What I bring, see that right there? What I bring to organizations is this systematic approach to taking complex broken processes and turning them into competitive advantages through cross-functional collaboration. So see how the plus took it from just a regular good story to strategic bragging. It connects your work to business outcomes and it explicitly states what this proves about your capabilities. So again, for those of you with your brag books, go through them and you can start building out your Star Plus stories following that same model. Okay. You probably already have some star stories from when you've been interviewing perhaps, or even, doing your performance reviews. But I guarantee you it's that plus part that's going to really stand out. Now, for those that are currently looking for work and you may not have all of your information, you'll want to go through, and think about whatever current stories you have and go back and add that plus element. Most of you probably already have pretty good solid stories, but it's just that strategic bragging component that is missing. Okay. So I'm going to give you one of my Star Plus examples now. So, and I'm going to leave out the names to protect the not so innocent at times. Okay, so the situation was at this company, we were facing significant workforce reductions due to contract changes. The organization had no experience managing large scale layoffs, and leadership was concerned about legal exposure and employee morale during this critical period. So, this was an actual situation I was involved in years ago. So, the task as the HR director, again, I'm stating my position, right? What role was I playing in this? As the HR director, I was responsible for designing and executing 16 separate reduction in force actions affecting 81 employees across 5 states while maintaining legal compliance and protecting company reputation. That was the task. So what action did I take? I developed comprehensive risk protocols, including legal review processes, documentation standards, and communication strategies. I personally managed each termination, ensuring consistent messaging and proper paperwork while coordinating with legal counsel. So, what was the result? The result was that I achieved 0 wrongful termination claims across all 16 RIF actions, maintaining 100% legal compliance throughout the process. Now, here's the plus. This flawless execution saved the company an estimated $500,000, more in excess of $500,000 in potential legal costs, and protected our employer brand during a vulnerable time. The systematic approach that I created became the company template for future workforce changes. This demonstrates my ability to manage high-stakes situations with precision and turn potential crises into controlled business transactions. So see how that outline there and how that plus really goes to show what impact you can make in a role and what you would probably have in a role that you're being considered for. Now, you might be thinking, hey, I don't have any stories like that, and I don't have access to those kind of numbers. So again, stop right there. Every job creates value. Every improvement matters. You just have to go back and think through what those stories are and the value that you added. Now, To help you do that again, I'm going to give you an AI prompt that will help you brainstorm and think through these. And again, this AI prompt will be available in the comments for you to cut and paste later on. So this is the prompt. Help me develop a compelling star plus brag story based on the components below. Here's what I accomplished, and you can describe your accomplishment in 2 to 3 sentences there. And then please help me structure this intro. The situation, the context and challenge, and why this mattered. The task, my specific responsibility. Action, the detailed steps that I took, and be specific about my contribution. Result, what measurable incomes, the quantify the impact, and then the plus, the business impact and what this proves about my capabilities. Ask me any questions to help identify metrics, business impact, and proof points that I may be missing. So I did this I did it for the example I just gave you. And fortunately for this particular example, I did have the numbers. So I was able to plug those in. So when I tell you this is a game changer, oh my goodness, it makes creating your brag story so much easier. And you can use that prompt for several of your accomplishments, to create different stories to demonstrate different things. So again, use the AI prompt, but it's an excellent exercise to go through to remind you of how wonderful you are and all the great things you've done in your organizations, right? Now, in using this model, there are some mistakes that you want to avoid making. Mistake number one is making it about the team instead of you. And I've heard this plenty of times when I've been interviewing people, and I often make the mistake myself. We always talk about we, right? We increase sales by 30%. No, this is about you. So make it about you. I led the initiative that increased sales by 30% by implementing a new lead scoring system and train the team on consultative selling techniques. So again, I know a lot of times we don't want to be braggadocious and we tend to be more humble. But again, you're trying to make a sale. You're trying to make a sale. And so it has to be about you. Talk about what you did. Mistake number two is focus on activities instead of outcomes. Again, this is another problem that I see time and time and time again, not just in interviews, but on resumes as well. People want to regurgitate their job description, what activities they did. We don't care about that. Okay. We don't care about that. We want to know, how did you make a difference and what were your outcomes? So wrong is I organized monthly team meetings and created new processes. Okay. Big deal. So the right way to do it is I established monthly strategic alignment meetings and redesigned our project management process, which reduced project delays by 60% and improved team productivity by 25%. So mistake number three, using vague metrics. So again, this is where, people are just vague and they're making claims. When you have those numbers, it makes a huge difference. So look at the example here. The wrong way is significantly improve customer satisfaction. The better way or the right way is I increased customer satisfaction scores from 7.2 to 8.9, and I reduced complaint resolution time by 40%. So again, if you are working, a lot of times you have your management reviews, your business reviews, you may have your scorecards. You should be keeping that stuff for yourself so that when you're creating your resume, when you're creating your brag stories, building your brag stories, you have those numbers you can plug in, because it adds so much credibility versus, hey, I just significantly improved customer satisfaction, right? Now, the fourth mistake is forgetting the business impact. The wrong way is ending with just the result. The right way is adding, this contributed to our highest customer retention rate in company history and positioned us to expand into 2 new market segments. So again, see how that additional is just really bringing it home and really talking about the overall business impact. Now, you'll want to practice these star plus stories until they feel very natural. Um, a lot of times it's good to record yourself going over them. Note that they should be about maybe 90 seconds to 2 minutes in length, because any longer than that, you're probably going to lose people's attention. But you ought to be able to drop it like it's hot whenever needed, at the grocery store, in the elevator, in an interview, your brag stories. Even you can kind of frame like the question around, hey, tell me about yourself. You can even frame that as a brag story by using those strategic brags. Okay. Now, I've talked about numbers a lot, even with resumes, and I've had this problem. Like I said, I haven't done the best with this in my last job, and I was in my last job for 8 years, and I didn't have a lot of metrics when I left. Unfortunately, I was laid off unexpectedly. My access was cut off within a couple of hours, and I had nothing except for the notebook that I kept, keeping notes for meetings and that kind of thing. I was able to flip back through and pull out a couple of numbers, but it would have been a lot better had I been keeping track of that stuff while I was working. So again, I cannot emphasize getting those numbers while you're working. Now, if you're in a job where the numbers aren't so obvious, and I talked about with HR and marketing, there is a way that you can quantify your impact. So example, so the question is, hey, but hey, I work in with HR, marketing, customer service, and I don't have obvious numbers like, salespeople do. As I mentioned before, every job creates measurable value. You just have to know how to look. So for example, for an HR role, we talked about employee engagement. So instead of saying I improved employee engagement, the strategic brag would be I increased employee engagement scores from 6.8 to 8.2, which correlated with a 23% reduction in voluntary turnover and saved an estimated $450,000 in replacement cost. So instead of saying plainly, I streamlined the hiring process, the strategic brag would be I reduced the average time to hire from 45 days to 28 days while improving quality of hire scores by 30%, enabling us to fill critical roles faster and reduce overtime costs by $85,000 annually. And then you have an example here for marketing professionals. So again, here you see where just a regular brag, 4, 5, 6 words, whereas the strategic brag is where it is peppered with numbers. And even when you look at these numbers on a resume, the numbers tend to stand out more when you compare it against a resume that has very little numbers. The ones with the numbers, the ones going to be the one to get the attention. So the thing is, think about the ripple effect that your work had in the organization, on your team, or whatever, be it how you improve the process, how you save money. So what was the downstream? That's how you can really think about those numbers and the impact. So if you're having trouble finding out what those metrics should be, or quantifying your value, I'm going to give you another AI tool to help you do that. So again, I'm going to put this down in the bottom in the comments so you can cut and paste it. But you see it here. I need help identifying measurable impacts from my work. In my role as whatever your role is, so I'm going to use myself. In my role as an HR manager, I helped organizations improve performance. Help me identify potential metrics in these categories. So you have the categories there: time savings, cost reductions, quality improvements, revenue or growth enablement, so on and so forth. So this will help you. And again, it's about brainstorming, working with AI to help you brainstorm and identify things that you may be missing. So this is a good exercise to go through to help you get to those. Now, if you still aren't able to get numbers, if you can, use educated guesses and estimates. Don't lie, don't inflate, but just take a good guesstimate. And when I've had interviewers ask me about the metrics for certain things I've done. I've just had to be, honest that, hey, unfortunately, I don't have access to that information. I got laid off unexpectedly, but I gather it was between so on and so forth. So just giving the best estimate that you can without lying or appearing that the information you may be given or you may be giving may not be totally true, right? So, but again, if you can get those numbers, that's best. Okay, so now that we have our brag book, we're getting our brag stories together. We now want to talk about how do we utilize it and deploy it effectively. So if you are meeting with a CEO for a startup, you may be telling them different stories than you would for a VP in a Fortune 500 company. So strategic bragging also means that you are tailoring it for the audience. So for startups, these are organizations that often want people who can wear many hats. So in those situations, you want to be able to emphasize your agility, your resourcefulness, your ability to change on drop of a dime, being accustomed to rapid change, building from scratch. Those are things you'll probably want to emphasize for a startup. For a large corporation, it may be different. You might want to emphasize scale, process improvement, how you're able to collaborate, how you're able to work with teams, stakeholder management. Those are probably things you'll want to emphasize for a larger organization. For growth companies, you may want to emphasize growth systems, how you're able to scale operations, managing rapid change, and then finally, for turnarounds, you'll probably want to emphasize problem solving, crisis management, change leadership, and those kinds of things. So, again, just like for interviews, you'll want to pick out the particular brags that would be most attractive to the audience that you're speaking to. Okay, so now that you have your brag book and you have your brag stories, we're going to talk about how to utilize it to land that job and how to manage it like an elite athlete. Because even though you have all of this information here, the stories that you tell a CEO of a startup is probably going to be different from what you would be telling a VP in a Fortune 500 company. So you'll want to know what brags to present to what audience. So for startups, most oftentimes in startups, they have, small teams have to wear many hats. So in those situations, you want to emphasize agility and resourcefulness, wearing multiple hats, rapid, problem solving, being able to build from scratch. For large organizations, you're probably going to want to emphasize scale, being able to improve processes, being able to collaborate, across teams, being able to work within teams. And then finally, for growth companies, you want to emphasize building systems and scaling operations and managing rapid change and creating infrastructure. And then for turnarounds, you will probably want to emphasize problem solving, crisis management, stakeholder communication, and change leadership. So again, it's the same accomplishments, but depending on the audience, you'll want to emphasize different things based on what they're looking for and what they value. So now that we talked about the audience, let's talk about how you're going to deploy it. Okay. Because depending on, again, the scenario, you'll want to talk about different things based on the scenario. So, tier one are your greatest hits. These are your 3 to 4 biggest brags, so to speak. This is where you knocked it out of park. They're your most impressive, most universally appealing accomplishments. You should be able to say these in your sleep, right? Drop of a dime. These are good for your first round interviews, your networking conversations, and your resume highlights. These are like your 30-second elevated commercial. Your tier two brags, and this is where you're going to have 4 to 6, these are your supporting cast brags. These are strong accomplishments that demonstrate breadth or specific skills. These are good for follow-up interviews when they ask for additional examples or when you need to prove capability in a specific area. And then tier 3 are your deep bench brags, and these are typically 4 to 6. These are solid accomplishments that show consistency over time, and they're typically good for panel interviews, multiple rounds, or when you need to demonstrate sustained performance. So again, depending on the situation, you'll want to deploy one of these brags from one of these tiers. So for example, in networking conversations, you'll want to lead with that tier 1 brag that's most relative to the person's industry or challenge. And this is where you want to kind of keep it conversational and not as formal. On your resume, your tier 1 brags are typically your bullet points that focus on the result and the business impact in qualified terms. Now, in your first interview, this is where you want to have your tier 1 stories ready. These are told in the Star Plus model that we talked about. And again, you'll want to make it conversational. So you'll want to practice your transition so that you're able to have it flow seamlessly from one brag story to another. Now, in final interviews, be prepared to go deep into any brag that they want to explore further. So you want to have those supporting details ready. Now, for phone and video interviews, you'll want to practice telling your brags with energy and confidence, and your voice needs to convey pride in what you have accomplished. So when you tell your brag stories, you want to sound proud, right? You don't want to come across as being very pompous or arrogant, but you just want to sound proud. Because if you aren't proud about your achievements and you don't sound impressive about them, then why would somebody else? So that's why even how you portray them, how you articulate them even matters. Okay. So strategic bragging again means connecting your past wins to their future needs. Okay. So we've covered a lot today. Excuse me. We've covered a lot today. So as always, this is for those who are willing to put in the work. So there's always going to be action items and homework to do. And again, a lot of people aren't going to do it, but you're probably going to be that person who is, so that when you submit that resume or that application, when you get that call for that phone screen, you're going to knock it out the park. Okay. So this is what this is all about. For those who don't want to do it, that's fine. We're going to leave them on the bench. But this is for the people who are really willing to get out here and do the work. So let's talk about your action items. So, action item number 1, conduct a brag audit. It's very simple. See what you have and think about every significant accomplishment you've had from your career. So it's just a brain dump, everything you can think of, everything you're proud of. And if you're unemployed, then go ahead and start digging through whatever emails and documents that you have so that you can start getting those together. And again, you just want to do a brain dump of everything, every accomplishment you can think of. That should be done this week. Another item you want to do for this week is using the AI prompts I gave you to help identify hidden metrics and quantify your impact. Again, going back through your emails and notebooks and reviews and documents will often help you find numbers that you forgot about. Over the next 2 weeks, action number 3, build 8 to 12 full Star Plus stories. Write them out completely. Include the plus business impact and what it demonstrates about your capabilities. Focus on your greatest hits first. If you are currently in the job market, you want to have those handy. So focus on those. Also, in the next 2 weeks, organize your brag book strategically. Again, we talked about the 3 methods, either by impact, audience, or career stage. Stop organizing it chronologically because that's what the amateurs do. Again, this is about the elite athletes who are serious about the job game. And then sometime this month for action 5, practice telling your greatest hit stories out loud. Record yourself. I think recording yourself is a huge tool to help build your confidence and help memorize this so it rolls off your tongue. time them, make them conversational and confident, own your wins. And for action number 6, for those who are currently in the job market, reach out to 3 to 5 former colleagues or managers using the scripts you provided. Ask for specific metrics or feedback about your shared accomplishments. And we're going to talk about this in networking in a couple of episodes down the road. But again, don't be ashamed to reach out to people, because most oftentimes, particularly when you've been separated from a job, people want to help you. So if you reach out to them and tell them that you're working on your brag book and your brag stories, and you want to practice your script with them, or you want to get some feedback or even get some additional data, most of the time people are willing to help you with that. Action number 7 is for those who are currently working. Go ahead and set up your monthly brag capture system. You might want to get a regular cadence for when you are documenting these things and going through your emails and your other documents to get the metrics. You can do it maybe the last Friday of every month, or every quarter, but you'll want to start doing it proactively, because again, you never know when you may get that call that your service is no longer needed. So you want to stay ready so you don't have to get ready. Now, for those of you that want to take it up a notch, you can test your strategic brags in low stakes conversations. So what do I mean by that? This is in networking events. This is coffee chats. This is, hey, maybe walking the dog. And then see how people react when you brag strategically versus when you're humble. I know, because so few people do it, it tends to catch people off guard, but in a good way. And it definitely makes you very memorable. So go ahead and practice those just to see what the reaction is. And I'd be curious to hear from you if you've done that and what reaction you've gotten. But remember, this is about setting yourself apart from the wah, 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 wah. All the noise that we hear from candidate. You want to talk about your accomplishments as proof that you can deliver results. But you can only do that when you're able to brag about them strategically and make it compelling enough to where the hiring manager, the HR manager, or whoever will believe that, hey, this is the person that we need because they can do it again. Okay. So if you work on this, in fact, I would love if you would, take a picture of your brag book, post it on my social media. If you, are working on this, if you have a Star Plus story you'd like to share, we'd love to see that as well. Again, you can put on my social media on Instagram or TikTok, or even here on YouTube. I would love to see it. So now that we've gotten this together, so remember, this is all about playing to win. We started with the personal brand. Okay. Then we talked about the winning target market strategy. Now we have our brags and our brag stories. Now we're ready to get to the winning resume. So I know a lot of people, whenever they start job hunting, the first thing they want to do is create their resume and start applying for jobs. No. We are building a foundation here. We are playing to win. So next week, we're finally going to get to the winning resume, because again, the resume is a very important tool. It's the first impression you're often going to make. But the fact of the matter is, a bunch of them are a bunch of garbage. And a lot of them these days won't even see the pupils of eyes because AI is screening them out. So I'm going to show you how to transform your resume from just a boring list of your job duties and activities into a true strategic marketing document that will get you interviews. So in that session, we're going to talk about why 90% of the resumes get tossed in 30 seconds and how you can be the 10% that don't. I'm going to talk about a resume strategy framework that positions you as the obvious choice and is going to make that recruiter pick up the phone to learn more. And then we're going to talk about how we're going to use the brag book and your brag stories to create compelling bullets on your resume that are going to grab attention. Because again, if you are holding resumes side by side, is the one with the numbers that are going to get the attention and probably a longer look. We're going to talk about ATS optimization that actually works and not just throwing a bunch of keywords on your resume. We're going to talk about different resume strategies for different career situations. And then, as always, I'm going to give you some AI tools and prompts to help you optimize for specific job postings. Okay, so we, as always, have talked about a lot. And look, I get it. Building a strategic brag book takes work. I mean, you see, I still have this folder here, and I've got to get started on mine. It's a lot of work. Writing out your Star Plus stories takes time. And even learning to brag strategically takes a lot of practice. And so I know you're thinking, hey, do I really need to do this? Well, doing this and not doing this can be the difference between you still sitting in front of a computer applying for 25, 50 jobs a week versus you being strategic about your job search, really focusing your energy and time on the roles that are really a good fit for you, where you can tell a compelling story and sell the people that you are the right candidate. So again, everybody's not going to do it, but there's a difference between those who will and those who won't. Again, it's just like Michael Jordan. Who are the people that are willing to go the extra mile? You can see it on the court. You can see it on the field. This is no difference here, because at the end of the day, the job search deal is not a game, but it is. And you got to play to win, and you got to bring your A game to the job search every single time. And that is what we're here to do. So thank you for hanging out with me. I would love to hear your comments and your feedback. Check me out on my social media, Exit to Excel on Instagram or TikTok. Also comment below in the YouTube episode, and I will see you next week when we talk about the winning resume. Take care.